Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the September garden checklist video. I do one of these each month for basically going over what I'm doing in my landscape and my vegetable garden during the upcoming month. I've done these for a little over a year. There's one for last September that may be a little more detailed. Last year I just went through kind of anything and everything you might do during the month of September. This year I've kind of concentrated more on what I'm doing specifically in my garden space. September is definitely a transition month, and my tomatoes are in decline. Many of the things in my summer vegetable garden are just giving up slowly but surely. Cucumbers are in the process of being done. I have started all my fall vegetable seeds. I'm probably a little bit behind. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, Zone 7B, and I probably would like to have my lettuce and broccoli and some things going in the ground right about now. I'm probably another week and a half away or so from doing that. If you follow the channel, you'll see how those things take place. I don't think any of the flowers on my tomatoes at this point will have time to actually finish tomatoes, but the tomatoes that are on here, I'm going to get over the next week to 10 days while I wait for those vegetable plants to be ready to go into the ground. So tomatoes will come out at that time. You can see back here, I've got some 11 or 12 foot tall okra that's still giving like crazy. My peppers are still giving like crazy. So likely what I'll do is I'll tear out the things that are just ready to come out like the tomatoes, and I'll start to put in some of those broccoli, cauliflower, lettuce. If you haven't started any of those things, you can buy plants. And so they're available at garden centers for you to buy. My area here that I grew the tomatoes on allows me to plant my lettuce in between them, and then I'll put some sort of fence. I've got a deer fence that will go around this space to protect my fall crops from rabbits. Beyond that, I'll also be prepared with a frost protection blanket to extend my season. And so, you know, sometime I can get a frost sometime by mid-October, typically closer to November, but if it did happen earlier in October, I will be prepared to cover the space. Moving over into the landscape, I planted this little honey oak leaf hydrangea during the month of August. I realize many of you don't do a lot of planting during the summertime. I plant year round. That's why I'm showing you this. But coming into September here in the South and into October especially, that's kind of the best time of year to be planting these woody shrubs. One thing to know though is it also tends to be our driest time of the year without any kind of tropical rains here in North Carolina and most of the Southeast. Things going in the ground do need to be watered initially. Again, it is the best time to put woody shrubs in the ground. The only thing I avoid planting as the fall comes on, and I've talked about this many times, is ornamental grasses, grasses that go to sleep during the winter time. I don't think they tend to rot during the winter without getting established and rooted in first. So those things I spring plant. The other things I would consider waiting till spring to plant are things that are super marginal. So if it's barely hardy in your area, September, October may not be the best months to actually plant those things. Other than that, it's just on. By mid to late September, best time of year. So if you're planning on doing any projects during the month, early in September, you can go ahead and get started laying out those beds, cutting in how the shapes of the beds are going to be. Or maybe you're just filling a hole here or there and it might be time to go to a garden center and be on the lookout for something that would finish off a space that you've been working on. The bed, come on girl, come on girl, get out of the beds. You know that's the rule, Okay, so here we are at the end of August, and a lot of my annuals and perennials are still looking pretty good. What I do know is that by the end of September, that's not going to be the case. The days are going to get substantially shorter during the month of September, and there's just going to be less sun energy for these annuals, and so they're going to start to fade away on me. So you got to make those decisions during the month of September. Go ahead and get rid of them as they start to decline. Anything that's diseased, you'll want to probably not put in your compost pile. Maybe move that off your property. That's true with leaves in general that are falling off plants in the late summer or early fall. If it's a diseased plant, if you got like a big leaf hydrangea and it's dropping diseased leaves all over the place, make sure you're cleaning those out regularly and again disposing of them not through your compost pile, and not using them as mulch in your yard. As you pull things out, and this is true everywhere, going back to the vegetable garden and in these beds, when I pull out, if I wasn't going to do fall crops in my vegetable garden, when I pull those tomatoes out, peppers out, okra out, cucumbers out, I would want to get that ground covered. And so for my vegetable garden, that would be an application of compost. For my beds like this, when I pull all these annual things out, or not, it's not all annuals, but when I pull the annual things out of here, if the soil is bare, I want to get it covered. So this is going to be hardwood mulch in my beds, compost in my vegetable garden. For us in the South, this isn't the end of our annual display. So as I pull out any annual things in this bed, I have started snapdragons and some pansies and some violas from seed. I'll also be buying some pansies and violas during the fall, so I can transition over to those things. I typically wait until about mid-October to put in pansies here in zone 7B. I use a soil thermometer, and soil temperature needs to be below, I think it's 65 or so before your pansies go in. So if you get a little cheap soil thermometer, that's a good tool for when that transition will happen. But almost certainly my summer annuals will have been faded by then. So there will be some period of time. Don't go buy your pansies and put them in the same day you pull out your summer annuals. That's all I'm saying. There's usually actually some sort of gap there between where these look good and it's actually time to put in pansies. Let's talk about the don'ts of September. And we don't want to be doing a lot of pruning. If you have a crazy branch here or there, I get these questions all the time. I got a dead branch on this, or I've got a branch that's going sideways on that. When can I cut it? Anytime. Cut those things off whenever. What I'm talking about is more general pruning. Getting plants resized, that kind of thing. Again, crazy branch, take it off whenever. Let's talk about if I went through here and started pruning in September, what would happen. This Chinese privet, this sunshine ligustrum right here, it's got new growth on it right now. If I pruned it right now, it'd encourage even more new growth, which could potentially be damaged by the first frost. My tea olives here, they bloom in the wintertime. I'd be cutting off the flowers. This loropetalum, it blooms in the very early spring. I'd be taking off the flower buds for next season. These encore azaleas, which are about to bloom here in the fall, I'd literally take off my fall blooms and potentially my spring blooms because they wouldn't have enough time to recover. So you can see those are just a few examples right here of why I wouldn't do any pruning right now. Most of the time, if you don't know what you have, just prune it after it blooms in the spring and you should be good to go. Fertilizing is the other thing we don't want to be doing now. I will put some fertilizer down on my fall vegetables and my pansies and snapdragons when those go in the ground. But shrubs, trees, all of these types of things, we don't want to be pushing new growth on them because again, even though there might still be growing a little bit right now, as the days get shorter, that growth's going to wind down, harden off, and prepare itself for the winter time. If I push new growth on them now, it's not going to have time for that to happen. So let's talk about when to prune back your perennials. For me, I just don't. I let them die back to the ground and then I clean them up. I think that's the best strategy to use just in general. Just like your spring flowering bulbs, let them take that energy down into the roots and store it for the winter. And you can see this echinacea here, how much green growth it still has on it. So it's still storing food for itself for next spring to put on this big show. Plus, as I was coming over here to film this, 2 goldfinches took off out of it. So they're eating these seed heads right now. So it's not the most attractive, although it still has a few flowers on it. It's not the most attractive it's been all season, obviously, but the birds are out here enjoying it. And again, this green growth that's on it is still important for the root system for next year's growth. I talked about in all of the summer garden checklist videos that during the summertime, I actually maintain my turf at the highest recommended setting. So for this zoysia, that's somewhere around 2 inches, maybe a hair higher than that. For fescue, that might be as high as 4 inches. During the month of September, I probably will lower it back down just a little bit. And what that requires is just mowing like 2 or 3 times in the same week, slightly lower. You don't want to take it down all at once. You risk scalping it, and the sun's still high in the sky and it could do some damage to it. So I'm going to bring it down just a hair. Again, I talked earlier about how dry it is. Going into September and October and even early November, that's the driest period of time here in the Southeast United States. So this turf is probably going to need me as more than it has all season long in terms of watering, and I'm actually going to water it today. This zoysia is a spreading grass, and so it's great because it's self-healing, but it's bad because it wants to spread out into my beds. And I actually, people have asked many times, I actually just take my weed eater and my string trimmer and turn it up on the edge, and I cut this edge every single week when I mow to keep it from spreading out into the beds. And that's how I manage the aggressive nature of my zoysia grass. This is a warm season grass, definitely not fertilizing it this late in the season. It's going to be going dormant mid to late October. If you have cool season grasses like fescue, it will be time to put on a fertilizer application during September. One other thing in the fall is that I'm in the transition for where I can leave my dahlias, my dahlia tubers in the ground. I'm in zone 7. Those of you in the colder areas are definitely needing to dig them up in the fall. You typically let them kind of die back to the ground and dig them up. And this is going to include caladiums and calla lilies and canna lilies and what else am I missing? Any of these marginal tropical bulbs or tubers that you've planted into your landscape. If you want to save them during the fall, is going to be the time to take them out. For me, in my area, it would be sometime in October. If you're in colder areas, it could be during the month of September that you'd want to take them out. There are probably plenty of videos on YouTube for how to dig and store your dahlia tubers and others. One thing I didn't mention out by the street on that echinacea was that those seeds can actually be saved, and there are many perennial things throughout your landscape that you may be able to save the seeds on. So that may be something that you want to do. Same thing in your vegetable garden, especially later in the fall on lettuce and collards and other greens and things. They're fairly easy to keep the seed on from year to year. If you're not interested in saving your own seeds, it's definitely the time to be ordering seeds. So for whatever spring crops that you're doing for next year, for your annual flowers, perennials that you want to try to do from seed, your vegetable garden, I would go ahead and get those seeds ordered pretty quickly. There's so many new gardeners in the world in the last 18 months that there's a lot of competition for those seeds. So I would get on that quick as possible. I just put up a video yesterday with my bulb order that I did from Color Blends. If you want to, it's that time of year, whether you order from Color Blends or whoever you order from, you want to make sure you're reserving whatever your early spring flowering bulbs. They're all available now. They ship typically to you based on when it's the best time to be putting them in the ground in your area. So keep that in mind. The other thing about September's really a transition month. I don't think I just told you to do very much other than I'm transitioning my beds. The rest of this video has been a lot of don't do kind of stuff. So we're waiting for a little later in the fall to be planting and that kind of thing. But it's a great time to assess, and this is what I'm doing in my landscape right now, is assessing all of the annuals, perennials, the placement of things that are in the landscape, and how I want to make changes for next spring, which annuals I want to grow or don't grow, perennials, if I need to move a shrub. I think September is not a great month to be moving things around in the landscape. But it will be in October, November, December. Once they're dormant, that's going to be the best time to start moving them around. So planning for that now. But again, assess how the summer went, how your spring and summer went, and plan for next spring. Thank you guys for following along with these checklist videos. I'll be back in October with another one. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because I have pretty good content coming in September. Thanks for watching.